What is up, guys? I'm Speo, and today I'm going to show you the thought process that went into making the heavy growl in my latest track, Nova. You can listen to the whole track with the link in the description below, but for now I'm just going to show you a part of the drop so you can hear what the growl that we'll build sounds like. Sadly, I can't show you the project file because my computer can't handle the workload with the recording software going on and whatnot, but let's take a listen. And here is the growl on itself. That is the sound that we'll be building today. Alright, let's rebuild the setup. First up, we wanna chuck in a Thor. With this Thor, we'll build a setup that'll create a nice frequency modulation sound that we can then use to create our growl. I should say though that this sound is pretty random, so it'll probably not sound exactly the same as my Nova growl, but it'll hopefully also sound pretty cool. Let's get into programming. First up, we want to switch the analog oscillator to a triangle wave and bring down the octave to octave 3. Then we want to chuck in a multi-oscillator for oscillator 2, bring down the octave to octave 2, leave it as a sawtooth wave and bring down the amount of detuning to 14. We are not going to route this oscillator into the first filter, but we're going to route it with an amount of 40 to the oscillator 1 frequency using the modulation matrix. And here is our nice frequency modulation sound. Now usually you wouldn't use a multi-oscillator as a frequency modulator, but that is the beauty about Thor. It just makes this stuff possible and it results in some crazy and cool sounds. Alright, next up I'm going to replace the low pass ladder filter for a state variable filter, change it to bandpass mode, bring up the resonance quite a bit to about 80, and reduce the frequency all the way. Then we're going to bring up the envelope amount to about 85, reduce the velocity amount all the way, and let's take a look at the filter envelope, which will now control the filter frequency. We will reduce the sustain and release all the way, and bring up the attack a bit to about 233 milliseconds. And there we already have our characteristic bandpass growl sound. But it sounds pretty weak, so let's fatten it up using the second filter. We will route the first oscillator into the second filter as well by checking this little box and hitting this little arrow right here to route it back into the amp. Then we're going to chuck in a comb filter, bring up the frequency to 10 kHz and hit this little invert button right here, which will invert the filter envelope, resulting in the frequency to go down instead of upwards. We will bring up the envelope about halfway and reduce the velocity all the way. Now I'm going to bring down the drive on the comb filter a bit, so the focus is still on the growl. Last but not least, I'm going to bring up the sustain on the amp envelope all the way, so we don't lose volume over time. Now the thing about this sound is that it can sound pretty shitty at times, but at sometimes it'll also sound pretty cool. So what we want to do is we want to resample the bits that we like and use them in our drop. And thankfully, Reason has a very easy way of doing this. We can just open up this mix channel right here and hitting the rec source button, which we've been using in past tutorials. And we can bring up an audio track by hitting Command T and selecting a stereo input from the Thor 1, which now lets us record what the Thor 1 is playing right into our sequencer. So let's select the Thor 1 in our sequencer lane and hit this little record button on the audio track so we can record right into it. Alright, I'm also going to bring up the range of the pitch bend wheel to 12, so we have a full octave of pitch bend modulation. And now I can lay down some growls and see if we can get some good results out of that. Alright, let's record some stuff. Alright, sweet. Now that we've recorded some audio, we can delete this MIDI track that we've created right here and focus on cutting out the good bits of this audio track. I'm just going to switch to the razor tool right here and cut out some of the bits that I like. Alright, let's get rid of the other stuff and keep the ones that we've cut out. As you can hear, sometimes this sound sounds pretty squeaky and not pretty pleasing at all. So it's pretty essential that we cut out the bits that sound good and don't use the ones that sound like crap, obviously. Alright, now that we've got some of the good bits out, we can process them further. Let's use this one. Sweet. So now let's get back into the rack and process this audio track further so we get a nice and rich growl sound. In the actual build, I used a Fatterator now to add some of this little fuzz that it creates, which sounds absolutely amazing. If we just take a quick listen. Absolutely awesome. But since some of you don't have the Fatterator, even though I highly recommend it, you can also go about this using a Scream 4 in either distortion mode, bringing up the tone, or in fuzz mode. Where you can control the tone with the P1 and the presence with the P2. I'm going to go for distortion mode right here. Next up, I'm using a notch filter, and in my actual build I used the edge red for this purpose. But an easy way to create a notch filter in Reason is just by hitting the M-class equalizer up and activating a parameter, bringing down the gain all the way and automating the frequency. Now we can add some additional movement to this sound. Sweet. Next up, I'll just add some tape saturation to make the sound a little bit louder and a little bit more brutal. But I don't quite like the distortion, so I'm gonna switch to fuzz up here and reduce the presence a bit. That sounds better to my ears. So next up, we've got a couple of EQs to get rid of ringers and some of the frequencies that we don't like. And for this bass, you want to reduce some frequencies at about 400 Hertz. You can hear we have a ringer here, which I detected by bringing up the gain and the Q all the way and just sweeping through the spectrum using the frequency knob. And now I'm going to bring down this frequency at about 540 Hertz using the gain knob, bringing it all the way down. Now we can use the second parameter to do similar stuff. Oh, that sounds absolutely brutal. Let's bring that down as well. But I'm not going to go through all the ringers now. You basically just want to reduce the frequencies at about 400 Hertz just a bit and dip some of the frequencies at about 3 kilohertz out as well. Now you can also boost the high shelf just a bit to make it more crisp. Even though this particular growl already has quite a solid high end. But you should remember that EQ work is always kind of personal preference. Just go for the frequencies that really hurt your ears and kill them because they usually hurt other ears as well. But for this subtle stuff, you can go kind of choose the settings that you like. I'm just gonna keep it like that. And last but not least, we're gonna chuck in a reverb unit on room algorithm to make this sound a little bit bigger, bringing down the dry wet to about 20 and doing the same with the decay. Getting into the EQ mode right here and bringing down the low gain and bringing up the frequency to about 800 Hz and then switching on the EQ up here. And there we have it. That is our nice growl that we've just built using this frequency modulation setup and a little bit of processing. And like I said, you could, of course, resample a lot more of these growls and play around with the pitch bend and some different pitch automation up here. You could also add some unison to this sound to make it a little bit more stereo. But what I just showed you is about the basic setup. I of course always encourage you to experiment more. But for now, this is it. This has been Spio. I hope this tutorial was useful. If it was, please drop a like. That would be much appreciated. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one of whatever you're having.